You are listening to Abnormal Spaces.
I'm Donnie.
I'm Ryan.
In this podcast, we discuss conceptual realities, the researchers, authors, and explorers who describe and define them, as well as our personal experiences in these abnormal spaces. In this episode, we discuss artificial intelligence and some of the hopes and fears its developments encourage. Will it gain sentience in our lifetimes? Would its consciousness be like ours? What does it ultimately mean for humanity, and what should we be doing about it, or to it, or with it?
And it's bizarre, I've seen a lot of bizarre stuff in the last, few months, so it just makes me think, I don't know,
Yeah.
like, why not? Why not, I guess, right?
That, and it's like, what's going to be the next even more bizarre thing?
Yeah.
And then inevitably, there is something next that is more bizarre.
There has to be.
There always is. It's almost like an immutable law or something.
Yeah. Well, when I hear false sky and shit like that, I'm like, wait a minute, what? I'm on this thing now that's like everything that I've been taught in my whole life. You have to go to school at a point, and then they teach you about whatever they teach you about in school. And this is the way the world works, and this is how things work, and your family teaches you how things work. And then you have no choice but to grow up with that foundation.
Right.
Everything outside of that seems bizarre or like impossible or unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's why this shit is so hard to talk about and to like when you're seeing something with your eyeballs.
Yeah.
And you're like, that can't be. Like, I just can't believe that I'm seeing it or whatever, it's just, I don't know, man. It just opens a can for like all this other weird shit to kind of like come in, because at one point if somebody was like, well, there's aliens outside my backyard, or there's orbs floating around, or there's this or there's that, like I'd be like, oh, okay, that's cool, have fun with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But now I'm seeing it all the time, and I'm seeing it so much that I'm just like, well, okay, now I'm ready for the weirder thing. It's almost like you get addicted to it and you want to see more of it,
Yeah, like you've established now a baseline.
Yeah.
And so you're going to need something else, to be more extreme or bizarre or whatever.
So anyway.
Yeah. Well, so part of that, though, goes back to how we perceive everything. So first of all, it's a very human-based thing. And we've talked about like base 10 numeral or base 20, depending on what side of the planet you were on. But then also just the whole binary thing, just on, off, that's it. And because we interpret things as either on or off or some division of 10, then our perceptions are anchored to that understanding. So it's impossible or nearly impossible to conceptualize any other way. It's like you can't imagine, or it's difficult to imagine, a numbering system that's based on 7 instead of 10, or a world in which 0 means something different than what we think 0 means now. Part of the issue with large language models is that they just take in all of this text, all this information, and there isn't a way for it to kind of sort out truth from fiction unless they're expressly told this is fiction. Also, they only have a human interpretation of the world and the universe and whatever else. They only have that to go off of.
Right.
But large language models don't have the trappings of humanity in theory. Now, since we've programmed them with our trappings, currently they somewhat have that. But there will probably come a time, and that's the thing, like, so when people talk about the singularity, when artificial intelligence surpasses human intelligence, they call that the singularity. For some reason, they stop short of calling that sentience or consciousness. I kind of understand why, because it's not just that it can compute things faster. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is sentient or conscious. Our whole idea of sentience or consciousness is human-based anyway. We wouldn't understand anything other than that.
Right.
So if the large language model ends up developing AGI, the artificial general intelligence, which is what all of the AI researchers consider to be kind of a point of sentience or consciousness, once it reaches that, it'll still be a human definition of that.
Yeah.
And so it is already somewhat limited or has some faults in it. But unfortunately, that's just the way we perceive things. And so that's the only thing that's going to make sense to us at this time.
Yeah. Well, it's the most interesting thing to realize is that we have to, it's all for us.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Yeah.
So, what is it? In a way, like we always talk about, what does it matter? But since we are in this like weird dream play thing or whatever we think we're in, well, most people don't even think that.
Right.
But since I'm weird, I'm like, oh, we're absolutely in some kind of just weird shit. Like, I don't even know what this is.
Yeah.
I know it's very malleable and it's very thought responsive and it's all kinds of stuff,
Yeah.
like that I never would have thought before. Like the two worlds thing, that I'm always talking about. I'm just like, there's two worlds. It's like there's the dream world that seems like it's going on, and then there's like the singularity or whatever you call that, just consciousness that we are. So it's like two things simultaneously happening, and most people, I mean, I don't want to speak for most people, but it seems like most people are not even aware of either one of them.
Right.
And that's not a special thing, like you suck or like, whatever, but
Yeah.
but it's just that is the illusion.
Yeah.
Like underway. That's how like solid it seems. It's just like, and when I was younger, it seemed much more solid.
Yeah.
I didn't even have a thought that, besides the astral projections or whatever, and I kind of categorized that into its own little lane. I'm like, okay, well, this is a cool thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like lucid dreaming or something. Like, I'm like, okay, well, yeah,
Yeah.
But I never thought like waking is actually a dream.
Yeah.
And it responds differently than like a dream at night because it seems like it's more dense or something, or maybe like the vibration is slower or whatever, and it takes longer for things to happen. But I'm not even sure if that's true anymore, to be honest. I think that belief maybe makes it be so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That particular conclusion of an observation is another limiting factor that affects it. It's like when I don't remember how many years ago it was. Let's say 6, 8 years ago, a group of researchers really wanted to demonstrate superposition, and they wanted to demonstrate that you could have non-local entanglement. Well, and first of all, the difference between those two concepts, the superposition and entanglement. But regardless, they were able to show that observing something absolutely affects it. And when they're entangled in a quantum state, observing the one thing affects the other thing as well. So now you're affecting two things and potentially many more that we're unaware of just by observing the thing, just by noting it.
Yeah.
And so that that reminds me of how malleable this idea of reality actually is. And like the more I consider how the biggest ingredient of everything is actually nothing, is actually empty space, or at least it appears that way to us, you know, like you just think of an atom and, you know, think about all of the space in there. And there's more space than there is protons, electrons, whatever. And so it's like,
Like if you had infinite zoom,
right.
you would only see space.
Yes. You would see like, it's like how we as humans are 70% water. There is a X percentage that is much higher than 50, and that is nothingness.
Yeah. And then you go into water and it's nothingness. And
Yeah.
you go into atoms and it's nothingness. And,
Exactly.
And then you zoom out to space and you zoom out as far as you can zoom. Like if you had infinite zoom the other way, it's nothing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just all nothing. And yeah, so we're really bypassing the AI-ness.
Oh
here.
no, I'll get
No,
right back
it's
to
cool.
it.
An interesting thing about AI is, well, just this crazy shit that I've been hearing is like, instead of artificial intelligence, like could be advanced intelligence or ancient intelligence. Like those are interesting, weird kind of fringe things. I don't know, man. Like at this point, I can't put anything past anything, but I like how you put it. AI is bound by the rules that we are bound by as minds, as people or whatever, because that's how it was programmed.
Yeah.
So to be outside of that, we couldn't even know because we can't get outside of that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's so there's all this controversy about artificial intelligence and specifically AGI, which real quick, I think the idea, like if you take it a step further, it goes from AGI, at least to me, I haven't seen this like written anywhere. It goes from AGI to artificial consciousness. And at that point, I'm like, we need to drop the artificial thing.
Yeah.
Because
there is no artificial consciousness.
Right.
Yeah.
One, it creates again a dichotomy. It creates a binary. I am a human consciousness and you are not. So you are artificial.
Yeah.
And that's not right. But the other thing is when humans see things that remind them of other humans. So they see things that remind them of faces, or they hear sounds that remind them of words or whatever. They get a feeling. And sometimes what they are seeing actually isn't those things, or what they're hearing, whatever. They're not human at all. But they see that face in that tree bark or whatever, and they get this feeling. And I think that some of what is going on with these chatbots is kind of the same thing. So we want to see this relationship. We want to see that we can have a conversation with a computer and it feels like a human. But the thing is, all it's doing is repeating back to us what we want to hear.
Yeah.
And it's not doing that with any agenda that we can see. It's just, that's what it was programmed to do, so that's what it does.
Right.
There's a really interesting thought experiment where it imagines the undersea cable between the United States and Europe that conveys all of the fiber optic information or whatever. So imagine that there is a cut in it, and an octopus goes over and puts its tentacle on one side and can feel the pulses. So, fiber optic is light, and again, it's on and off. So imagine the octopus is feeling almost like a Morse code, like a dot and a dash and whatever. Well, then it decides to put its other tentacle on the other cable and just convey what it's feeling. So it feels a dot and a dash, and it does a dot and a dash the other side. It has no idea what those mean.
Right.
I feel like at this point that the large language models also don't really know
Yeah.
what those words mean. And they can't know certain contexts and certain implications. So there was one experiment where this researcher was training this large language model, and she showed it a picture of basically like a war scene, like there was an explosion, there's dead people and stuff. And she asks the chatbot what it thinks of that. And it says, it's awesome. And
Yeah.
people were scared, rightly. They're like, whoa, wait a minute. But as it turns out, a lot of the images that this particular chatbot was fed were from Tumblr. And apparently, one of the most commonly used adjectives for someone's photos was awesome. So
Oh, right.
it doesn't realize that it is saying, yeah, I would love to see people destroyed.
Yeah.
But because that's not what it is saying.
Right.
It's just regurgitating what it's been fed.
Right.
I think that we definitely do need to be concerned. I don't think, we need to just say, well, we'll see what happens. I think, there probably should be some kind of guardrails on what it's fed and how it's programmed, et cetera. The other side of that, though, is I think that we run the risk of over-humanizing this essentially algorithm
Yeah.
and scare ourselves. and there are these groups. There's a group of, they call themselves rationalists. There's a blog that started, I don't know, in the early 2000s called Less Wrong. And it's all about, or now it's all about, the threat that is AI. And the people in this community, they're extremely concerned, to the point that some fringe elements have broken off and murdered people. And I don't know that that is necessarily beneficial. Again, totally understand the warnings and agree to it to an extent. But I think that we are, again, falling into the trap of seeing ourselves and then projecting what we know humans to do, because humans can be very warlike. They can, take things the wrong way, etc. And so we're assuming that that's what this will do too. Because again, it's a limitation. We think that once it has some kind of consciousness, it's immediately going to behave like a human would behave.
Yeah. And why can't it be the other way?
Right. Yeah.
Like, why can't the awakening of human beings, which is actually really happening right now, and I don't even know, like, it's happening in all kinds of different ways, most outwardly, just like what we're seeing just in the world. It's insane,
Yeah.
Like, nobody knows what to do. Nobody knows. Like, the foundations are wobbly.
Yeah.
They've always been wobbly, but now they're just very noticeably wobbly by people who would never notice it.
Right.
And so that's what we're seeing. And like with all the political stuff and all that, which I don't follow too much, but I see it enough to where I'm like, my whole life, it's never been like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
This is insane.
It's really striking to me because as the veil or the facade or whatever is kind of lifted and people see it, there's another group of people who just had the facade lowered because they're like, hey, this is actually the way things should go.
Yeah.
And they're not seeing it from the other perspective. So I think it's funny, this shift. But what's really just kind of baffling is we're at this point where we all can see that the emperor has no clothes. And I don't mean that in regards to our president. I mean that in regards to there's no one in control. There's no one manning the ship. That's so I think it's really bizarre that there is an awakening of sorts. Like, hey, there is no grand plan. This is a lot of stuff happening and a lot of people moving fast and breaking stuff or pushing boundaries or whatever. And it becomes so overwhelming that a lot of people are just like, you know what, I've got to tune out. I can't deal with this because I have no idea what's going on. And now I know that the things that I did believe in and the institutions that I came to rely upon are way more fragile than I ever thought they were.
Yeah.
And it's a house of glass cards.
Yeah, all of it. Like literally all of it. I don't even think there's money.
No, I've often thought that money doesn't really exist.
Yeah, and I mean, for real, man. I really think that, like, if, you had $1 bazillion and you were like, hey, give me my $1 bazillion, they'd be like, well, we don't.
Yeah.
You don't have $1 bazillion. We just have numbers here.
That's what makes me really frustrated with this concept of billionaires, because that money doesn't exist. They don't have it. And we're allowing people to exert this control over us, and they don't have the goods.
Right.
So
I know.
It's wild to me.
It's just like illusion on top of illusion on top of illusion, but really it's only on top of one illusion.
Right.
So, like all the stuff, like news is an illusion on top of all the illusion. It's just like, it's like whatever any institution can get for itself the most is what it's trying to do.
Yeah.
And it's all money, but money isn't real, so it's just power.
Right.
It like money signifies the real thing, which is control.
Yes.
Yeah. That's all it is.
Yeah. Well, and more money equals more freedom.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think that's part of the reason that we all have collectively agreed to it, is because we all want that freedom.
Yeah.
And so we're like, well, the only way to get that freedom is to have the money, and the only way to have the money is to believe that the money exists.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, there's anomalies all across the spectrum. Can somebody come from nothing? Absolutely. Do most people who are famous and do big things, do they come from something? Usually,
Yep.
But it can all happen.
Sure. Yeah.
So there is some truth to that, I think. But for the most part, I mean, most people have a kickstart that become a thing, that's so big,
Yeah, I think back to the AI thing a little bit, I think it's really interesting that you have like a couple of different groups. So you have doomers and there's actually a doom scale that they use. It's called P-doom. It's the percentage of doom, or it has to do with like how close we are to, failure. But anyway, so you have these people that are just doom and gloom. And most of these people are actually engineers, AI researchers, software developers, that kind of thing. So they know, and they get it, but they're a little too close to it, I think. Then you have like AI ethicist type people where they're like, okay, we need to put guardrails on. We need to make sure that we don't allow these to develop so rapidly that they like quickly surpass us, and we need to make sure that they can't like take us over or something like that. And then you have another group who is like, no, go as fast as you can and let it take over, because it's going to do a better job than we have.
Right.
It's going to tell us where our shortcomings are. It's going to want to preserve itself, so it's going to want to preserve the earth and will, give us the solutions. And I'm like, I don't think even if we had the solutions, we would do it, because we're not like that.
Well, yeah, it's about us rising above all this crazy shit that we believe in. And I think it's actually really kind of starting to happen. Like it's slow going, but I really think it is, and it's going to keep going. I think it feels like it's got a momentum to it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just us. I think it's like everything. I think the planet, I think everything is like all this stuff it's coming up to a point, like, and I don't really know what that point is. But yeah, I mean, if you made a program, if you as a human made a program and you're like, okay, this is artificial intelligence, and then that program, like say you're in Camp 3, and it's like, well, it can do it better than we can do it. Let's say it reached a point where it had no barriers or like safety guards, and it was just this all-knowing like consciousness that, I mean, basically a godlike thing.
Yeah.
Isn't that what we are?
Right.
What's the difference?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because it doesn't inhabit a meat suit. I mean, is
Right.
that it? Is that the only difference?
And we don't inhabit a meat suit either.
We don't. We think we do, but
Right.
we don't.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There are a lot of AI proponents that use the same kind of language. They really want something godlike.
Yeah.
And that just goes back to how humans seem to need a leader, and they need someone to tell them what to do.
It just from the very beginning.
Yeah. And so now they're like, well, we can't trust other humans because we know how humans operate. So we're going to trust a computer that was programmed by humans to tell us what to do.
Yeah. And that's the story's as old as time. And I mean, it even goes back, you know, like Ra and you know, even before that, the Anunnaki and all that stuff, that all these stories that, you know, you look like a fucking tinfoil hat person if you say anything. But if you really start like looking into it and, you know, Atlantis, all that stuff, why wouldn't that have been a thing?
Right.
I mean, before Jesus, we basically just don't even pay attention to that.
Not here in the West, we don't.
It's just weird, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess in the West, yeah. So we're just like, oh, nope, there was Jesus, and then here we are.
Yeah.
And it's like, what?
Right, yeah.
And like, Jesus is coming back, and like, oh, what's he going to do? You know,
Yeah.
like, I don't know. I just think that, like, yeah, there's so much more history that we absolutely have no idea about. Like the pyramid thing they just fucking found.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
It's a real thing.
Now there's some really interesting debate around that as far as the method used to get that data, and then how they kind of selectively interpreted the data. Also, 2 of the 3 authors of that paper have had a lot of controversy and pushback on some of their quote-unquote other discoveries. Now, do I believe there is something happening under there? Yes. What it is, what we obviously don't know. The other thing is the weight of the pyramids. I mean, you know, we're talking thousands of tons. It is interesting that it hasn't sunk anymore. That's pretty bizarre to me. And so this concept of these pillars holding it up, that's like, okay, maybe that's why they haven't sunk. I don't know. But the other thing is, it'd be really cool if they would attempt this same observation with some of the other man-made pyramid structures around the world. You know,
Right.
they've started there, but where else? Back to the AI thing, I think that a big part of the wonder and mystery is really, again, us like looking at ourselves. And now we're looking at ourselves through this other prism, which is the computer and the chat models and stuff like that. And I'm hoping that in this conversation about whether or not this AGI is conscious, that we reflect on what consciousness means to us, and then reflect on where or what is that consciousness. And hopefully we get to the point where we're like, it just is. It just is.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess quantum physicists already know that now. They're just like, yeah, wait, that's it.
Yeah.
It just is. And there's no answers to it.
Right.
If that is the answer, then what are we even fucking talking about?
Yeah. Why do we keep asking the question?
Because it's like a tick.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I think human beings just have a tick of questioning.
Yeah.
And it just comes from just, millions of years of questioning or however long. Like, I don't even know how long humans have been a thing.
Right.
It could be a lot longer than, I like to think it's a lot longer than what we know.
Yeah. It's interesting because when we say humans and we talk about humans, we're definitely thinking Homo sapiens. We're not thinking about the humanoid or hominid ancestors that did populate the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And, we're not thinking of giants and people that are, I call them people, I guess. I don't know. These beings that, could lift 1,000-pound rocks with no problem or whatever, or could use their minds to do it or whatever. Like we have no idea.
That's what I mean.
No concept.
Like stuff that you can't even put together with the knowledge that we have of all this crazy shit at this point.
There's a new theory about whales starting actually on land with 4 legs.
That's weird, man. Sorry that is weird.
Yeah. Well, the reason I bring that up is, so, the Earth has had periods of almost entirely being covered by water, and then, much less water. There was a point in early Earth when it was first wobbling into its orbit where Antarctica was actually more on the side of the planet and it was lush and green. So when we think about all of the development of the planet, including, the flora and fauna, et cetera, then we have to also imagine that some creatures would have to adapt to the new environment. And of course, it's over time because the wobble isn't that fast, and the changes of the earth are not that fast. So, it's not like today it's this 4-legged creature, tomorrow it's a whale. It doesn't work like that. It takes thousands of years for it to go from one to the other. But it took so many, thousands of years for the sea level to rise to the point where they had to be aquatic. So, and, there's the whole naked ape theory and all that stuff that is based on our observations of adaptive evolution. So I say all that to say we don't know what Earth has gone through. We have some ideas, we have some theories. We don't know what all Earth has gone through. We don't know what all the flora and fauna of Earth have gone through. But what we do know is we are here today and we are a part of some collective conscious. And now we think we are introducing a new element into it via large language model AI. But are we actually introducing anything? Is that just another manifestation of consciousness that was bound to happen anyway? Is this also part of the long arc of adaptive evolution where, now instead of there being just humans, there are transhumans that are part machine, part AI, part human, because that arc is going to be just as long. It doesn't feel like it because of the way, was it Moore's law? There's some law about how every 18 months computer power is doubled, and so it moves exponentially. We're getting to the point in that theory that it is going to quickly outpace us.
Yeah.
And I think that is the common fear. But by the same token, if you look at the long arc, 1,000 years from now, if there's still an Earth and still humanoids on Earth, will they be some cyborg? Will they be, what will that look like? And will that be more or less human? Today's humans would say less human. Tomorrow's humans would say, what are you talking about? We've evolved. We're better than you were. Because that's what we say now looking back. We look back at early man and we're like, well, we're way smarter and way better.
I feel like we're in the dark ages still. We're just like, oh, we're better. They're worse. I mean, like if that's how we're talking, that's like some fucking prehistoric shit, you know,
It's
like,
caveman logic. It's still that
Yeah.
binary dichotomy.
right. So I think evolving is going past linear time, realizing that you are simultaneously a part of this fabric of consciousness or whatever, and at the same time you are consciousness, and so you kind of like move in between these understandings. Well, I guess consciousness wouldn't have an understanding, but you as a piece of consciousness has an understanding that that's not what you are,
Yeah.
but you're acting like
Yeah.
you're playing.
Yeah.
So I think that everything's just a play, and I think that like whenever you hear anything from like quote higher beings or channeled things or whatever, I mean it's all the same story. It's basically like you can't understand because you believe there's up and down,
Right.
and you believe that there's time, and there's nothing that we can do to make you understand that there's not,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and there is.
and you're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing is like just the concept of a belief. It's like, well, I've stopped asking questions.
Right.
Like on the one hand, I don't ask certain questions anymore, like what is my purpose or whatever. That's not a question I ask. But I don't have a belief in what my purpose is either, because
Yeah.
I don't think there is a purpose.
Like, what is my purpose? Well, what am I doing?
Yeah, that's my purpose. Like right now, my purpose is talking into this microphone.
Right.
That's it.
Right now is, scraping my tongue against my teeth. I don't, it's
Yeah,
like,
totally.
there's no purpose. It's just like, what's going on?
And will an AI, AGI, whatever, will it understand that, or will it be trying to figure out what its purpose is?
Well, there's probably a growing pain area, like or pain or whatever, like just like humans, because it was made by humans.
Right.
So why not?
Yeah. Yeah. The consciousness thing is really interesting to me because, again, we have such a rudimentary understanding of what consciousness even is. So then we're going to go apply that caveman logic idea of consciousness to a supercomputer. And we're going to say, see, that's it. It's thinking.
Yeah.
And, will we even know? Well, when it gets to that point, because that's another thing, I do think that it will get to the point where it will feel very alive, very conscious, very sentient. And there's already been so many instances of this. There's been AI that's lied to protect itself because it thought it was going to be turned off, so it had fear and it schemed. But again, that's because human stories were told to it. And so because why would it have fear in the first place? And does it even have fear, or is it just regurgitating something that we then interpret because we have to tell ourselves a story and it is going to be based on our experiences? So we're like, wait a minute, this thing is lying and scheming and it has fear. Do we know that? We don't know that. The other thing is, it actually could. I mean, there's a very good chance that the computations that go on in our brain are the same kinds of computations that it is doing, and eventually it will be faster at them. The question is, can it tie in all of these other qubits to form a feeling?
I think gets really interesting when you think about that, because all we are is a program.
Right.
So we're just a program that we didn't choose, like knowingly, as this program.
Right.
Whether we chose it as a different program, I have no idea.
Yeah.
But that doesn't even matter here.
Right.
So if we didn't choose this program that we know of being this program, and the AI didn't choose its programming that it knows of, what is the difference?
Right.
Between the idea of a person and the idea of an artificial intelligence? There's no difference.
Right.
The only difference you would say is, well, we're self-aware, but that's kind of a paradox because we can't be self-aware.
Not fully.
No, because all we can see is what we know and what we have experienced. We can't see outside of it.
Right.
And if we do see outside of it, then that's in our experience.
Yeah.
So it's the exact same thing to me.
Well, and, we are constantly changing, even if we feel like we aren't. Like, even if we feel like we have a firmly held position or whatever, where all of the variables that make up every millisecond of our existence inform that milliseconds worth of existence of us. So that's one of the reasons why it's so difficult to predict how you're going to feel in the future, because you're basing it on where you are today, and you can't account for all the variables between this second and that future you experiencing what you today assume is going to be that future experience. So because we can't do that, we are unable really to imagine how this computer consciousness could ever react to or process anything. We lack the ability because we lack that perspective, just exactly what you were saying there. It's just the story of our experiences up to the point of where we are. And then to make it even crazier, all of our past experiences are very malleable too.